They said that I could not do it, that I could not take red, lifeless clay soil and produce much better, richer soil by planting cover crops the way that I do and grazing pigs. I'm Rod from Dowdle Family Farms, and last week I planted our warm season cover crop mix, the first cover crop mix of the summer. For most smaller size farmers or producers, we don't have a whole lot of options for planting cover crops, especially if we're part-time farmers, small farmers with lean operations. Several years ago, when I started growing cover crops on this field, I used our 8-foot disc behind my little tractor and disced the field just to get the soil in shape so that I could plant it. Time and time again, I'd have people tell me that you can't improve soil health if you continue to disc. And most of the people would cite the 5 or 6 soil health principles. The one that got people the most is minimum soil disturbance. Because after all, disking, plowing, tillage is going to disturb the soil. Now, let's just be real here for a moment. When I disked this soil, I ran over it with the disc one time. It was a little wet and it looked a lot like that ground right there. Some clumps of dirt, some weeds. I broadcast the seed and then I drug a drag harrow face down on the ground to help cover up those seeds. One pass with the disc, one pass with the drag harrow after the seeds were broadcast. If you look at this ground from a couple years ago, it's red, lifeless, packed hard, and has very little soil structure on it. There are times that we use cows. For example, this cereal rye crop here behind me that's got bacoodles of balanza clover and chicory. I've had 6 steers that I'm pasture finishing, and they've been grazing it and doing an excellent job of knocking that forage down. And in most regenerative circles, cows get the vast majority of the credit. After all, they trample a lot of forage, they knock a lot of it down, they feed soil life, and people talk about management intensive grazing. Mob grazing. I get comments all the time asking if I've watched the Carbon Cowboys and their YouTube channel. Now, I'm not knocking any of these practices, any of these channels, any of these videos. But in my observation of raising pigs, cows, and poultry, pigs are by far the best option of rejuvenating soil life. 2 years ago, I could barely disc the soil, much less get anything planted. Last year, we had a fairly decent crop out here, and the very first year we had a lot of weeds, a lot of weedy grasses. Our cover crops came up and they did fairly decently, but they were thin, sparse, and didn't do particularly well. This winter, the cover crops have performed beautifully. But we've had balanza clover, Austrian winter peas, chicory, and many other cover crops out here in this pasture that were more than belly high on the steers, and in some places they were growing over my head. You can see that the cows that have been grazing the clovers over here and the grasses in this paddock, they've knocked an incredible amount of biomass to the ground in addition to their grazing. It's just amazing how productive this ground has been. It's not just about the productivity of the land, although for many farmers that's what they're concerned about, because we need that productivity to be able to monetize our farming operations. But it's also about the incredible amount of life that we bring both above ground and below the ground. It is absolutely mind-boggling how much of a difference all of this makes after 2 years. We're able to grow more forages, continue to improve soil life without the need of additional fertilizers, synthetic chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, without expensive inputs. We're able to produce far more forage in just a few months with our land here than we could all year with our cattle, with the grasses that were out here before we planted our crops. Most of the comments that I get about pastured pigs or hogs are people that, quite frankly, they're either used to wild hogs or they're used to pigs that are not managed well and they're not managed very effectively. And there are always the few people who make baseless claims. Let's go back to how we plant our cover crops. Last year I purchased a small lightweight no-till drill that has allowed us to plant more crops more effectively in many areas. When I first started off, the only resource I had was a tiller, and that's how I planted my cover crops. Since our YouTube channel has gotten a lot more views in the last couple of years, I've had so many more people reach out and say, hey, you can't build soil this way. You're going to destroy your soil by disking. You've got to go no-till. You've got to focus on perennials. And so many other ways of criticizing the way that I'm producing the forage that we have to feed both our cows and our pigs. Many of these statements have a little kernel of truth, but they also are not very practical for a lot of different reasons. Let me explain. Most livestock farmers are not going to be able to justify the expense of an expensive no-till drill to plant cover crops. It's just not realistic. Now, row crop farmers that already have a no-till drill, maybe to plant wheat or other crops, can use that, and that's very effective. Plus, they're farming thousands of acres, and the cost of that drill is spread out over not just many years, but also several thousand acres. And so that leaves small producers like me in more of a quandary. Do we just not produce cover crops? Do we just continue to use perennials and graze our cows and our pigs on perennials? And when my dad planted this 10-acre field that I've got the cows and the pigs in, he put out several tons of lime per acre over a couple years. He fertilized it and then did 2 different plantings of fescue, and he added some white clover in there. The first year he fenced it off so that the fescue could get a good stand, but the soil here stays wet. It's very clay. There's not a whole lot of organic matter, and there was very little production on this land. When you're starting off with poor soils that don't have much soil life, that don't have much soil organic matter, perennials just don't perform very well. But you can plant something like a sorghum sedan grass that produces tons of biomass per acre. It needs very little fertility, grows in a wide range of soil conditions, and it can dramatically increase the amount not only of organic matter in the soil, but the amount of forage produced, all while improving soil life. Now, I've done no forage test analysis other than just cutting some of our forages from time to time, weighing them, calculating the average moisture content based on the data and research that I have. It's not the best, most accurate assessment. It gives me a little idea. Producing several tons of dry matter forage, highly nutritious dry matter for our livestock out here, all with just crop seed and seeding costs. That means running the tractor, pulling the disc, plow, whatever. We could not have done that without disking the soil. We rented a no-till drill before from our county office, and it was in poor shape. I didn't know how to use it particularly well. Obviously, I'd be able to use it much more effectively now, but it just was not a practical solution for us. And so a light disking on top of the soil, disking up no more than the top 4 inches, but usually just 2 or 3 inches of soil, not to get it deep, but just enough to allow good seed to soil contact for those cover crop seeds that we're planting. Now, there are some no-till ways of planting that I use today, but they weren't accessible to me years ago. Over here where the cows are, where I planted what had been an oat field that those cows had grazed, the cows came over here, and before a rain that we had last week, I went on and broadcast some worm seeds and cover crop seeds in this field. I think they're going to grow well. I think they're going to germinate and perform fairly decently. My seed cost per acre is going to be a little bit higher here, but I think it'll work, primarily because the cows are on there to knock the seed onto the ground. I may be wrong, but I think that is going to perform very well. I suspect I'll be able to plant that same way there, and I think it's going to perform fairly well too. When I get to the next field over though, I'm going to put the cows in there to graze it, and I'm going to have to disc. Partially because the pigs were in there and they rooted up and made a little bit of a mess. Also, I need to break up some weeds that were there so that the cover crop seed is not competing with those plants. The soil in this field is not quite as good as it is in those other two. I don't disc every time I plant something Often if I have a sorghum Sudan grass cover crop that's already there, I can just run over it with a bush hog or a flail mower. If I have a sorghum Sudan grass cover crop and I'm trying to plant something in August or September, a quick growing crop that I can graze our pigs on before planting our cool season crop, if I were not going to disc the soil, I could still plant cover crops in these fields. I may not get quite as good of germination, but I could still do it. The problem is I would have to use some kind of herbicide to terminate the crop that's there already. So many no-till producers are using herbicides to get their cover crops planted. Either a pass of herbicide before or a pass of herbicide when they're trying to terminate the crop to plant their cash crops. Some of them are not. I'm not trying to put everyone in the same category. However, a 3-inch light disking on top of the soil versus a spraying of herbicides that we know are going to reduce earthworm activity, are not going to be the best for soil life. Which one do you think is best in that situation? Personally, I'd rather disc the soil lightly, broadcast the seed, level everything out once or twice a year, and get an excellent crop. And I think this is where people need to change their perspective and be a little bit more open. You'll hear a lot of people talk about the importance of understanding your own context and adapting soil health principles to your own farm. But what many people do is they'll see a video from me or the Carbon Cowboys, or they'll hear a TED Talk from Gabe Brown or Ray Archuleta, or they'll hear a lot of information from so many different people, and they'll apply that strictly to every single. They can miss the boat entirely and think that I'm doing it wrong. It's just not practical. So many small producers have other options for planting their cover crops. Now, likewise, I'm not saying that people shouldn't use herbicides. I'm not saying that people shouldn't use pesticides or fungicides or no-till equipment, or saying that they should use no-till equipment. What I do think people need to do is understand, broadly speaking, not just in agriculture, but in life in general, that what works in some situations is not practical in other situations. And going out here and disking this field up is a lot better than just having perennial pastures that don't perform. Because so much life comes to our farm in the form of wildlife like turkeys that have exploded in populations because they have so much life out here, from insects because of the cover crops that we're growing, to deer and rabbit, even a bald eagle that wound up stealing a piglet from me, red-shouldered hawks, red-tailed hawks, and many others. Anyway, y'all take care and have a great day.